So, I've heard Daniel give that presentation before, and but it just dawned on me that in his presentation, he hits on a number of the civil rights, the legal rights that we're talking about. And then it made me think, well, it might be a good idea for you to pull out of your materials the list of legal rights so we're all on the same page. So what I'd like you to do is look inside your binder for the manual that looks like this. Got it? And then turn to page 34. There's a chart on page 34 that lists the legal rights that are in the Florida guardianship law, as I mentioned before. And they start with the right to apply for governmental benefits. And of course, there are two columns. One, that the right can be taken away and delegated to someone else to exercise for the person, and then rights that can't be given. They can be taken away by the court, but they can't be delegated to anyone else. And that makes sense, right? When you see what they are, a court can remove someone's right to marry, but they can't give that right to somebody else to exercise on your behalf. So somebody can't make you get married or vote or apply for a driver's license, those others. But I was listening to Daniel, and he talked about having an attorney, and the attorney helping him with the right to make medical decisions through a healthcare surrogate designation. He talked about the right to vote. So I think Daniel's presentation is a good example of how what we're talking about is in context of someone's life. So I wanted to just make that note, make that point. And now, I wanted to share with you a little bit of history about our team, how we got to this point, how you ended up in these seats. The Florida Developmental Disabilities Council, and I want to mention, we've got a member of their staff here, Rick Lockenbach. Wave your hand, Rick, here. So if you've got questions about FDDC, just grab him at a break. But they're mandated by the federal government to create resources and strategies and ways to help people with disabilities and their families. So back in 2008, the council put out a funding request to develop materials about guardianship. And at that time, one of the members of the team who's not here today, and I responded to that request, but with a little twist. We gave them information about guardianship, but we really focused on the alternatives to guardianship, the other options that were out there, to give people a full range. The council was delighted with that approach, and we developed those materials and traveled across the state doing workshops. Lighting the Way to Guardianship and Other Decision-Making Alternatives was the resource that was created. You have the latest edition of that manual, hot off the press. I think it was printed last week. So it has all of the current law in it, and the resources are all current. So fast forward, as we're meeting families across the state, and we are workshopping Lighting the Way to Guardianship and Other Alternatives, we heard a repeating refrain, and that was, I got guardianship because when my child turned 18, they told me if I was going to be involved still in the school decision making, I had to go get a guardian. And I see some people nodding out here. And we kept saying, well, there are other options, and here are the options, and here are your choices. And they would go, oh. So we felt for a long time that you were the people we wanted to reach, so that we could share with you what the options are, and you could pass that on to families. That's why we're here today. And I thought that was a perspective of the group that put the materials together. But part of our group, of course, you'll see representations from everywhere. We've had lawyers, judges, court personnel, state agency personnel. We've had people with disabilities, their family members, court monitors, I'm sure, retired professors, current professors, you name it. We've had all kind of stakeholders, secondary educators as a part of the group. But for this panel, what we did was we assembled an educator, a parent, and a former student to talk about their perspective of why information and education on legal rights is important. And so let me introduce the panel. You've met one member already, and that's Daniel Jordan. And next to Daniel is seated his mother, Anna Jordan. And I kind of credit her with, as a rule of thumb, you credit the parent when the children turn out good, you credit the parents. When they don't turn out so good, you say it's just in the environment. So we credit Anna for Daniel's successes. And Amanda Lewis, who is a secondary transitions educator in Leon County. And they're making up the panel, and I'm gonna guide a discussion with them about their perspective of this whole subject of talking about legal rights and the transfer of rights at age 18 and the information that they think is necessary. As soon as I find my questions. Okay. So let's start with Anna. You all have mics, right?
Yep.
And and think about, if you have questions when they feel free to participate in this conversation, and somebody's going to tell me when I have to stop talking, right? Cool. All right. So Anna, could you describe for us how and when Daniel's IEP process approached the topic of transfer of legal rights?
Sure. I think I'm going to stand up so I can see people in the back. Could I just ask, are there any parents here today? Oh, okay, great. Okay, you can be my credibility check. When I say the first thing when someone approached me about legal rights, I was scared to death. I spent so long trying to figure out what needed to be done that the idea that suddenly I wasn't going to be totally in control was frightening. And I have to say, when Karen told me she was going to ask me this question, no one talked to me about transfer of rights. No one. Until another parent said, do you realize that when you go to the doctor with Daniel now, you have to get his permission to talk to the doctor? And I said, that's ridiculous. I don't have to do that. Yes, I did. And especially to have a child who, now a young man, who had some very significant medical issues, heart surgery, spinal fusions, suddenly how could I let him speak for himself to these specialists whom I still wasn't sure what they were saying, to me. So the transition of rights at the age of 18 was kind of a self-taught journey with my husband and me and with a group of other parents. And last night we were talking, and there were a group of 8 of Daniel's friends, and whose parents I knew from middle school and high school, and we just decided we didn't know what the heck was going on. So we met at my house, and we each took a different entity, just a different agency, a different expert, and we just took ourselves we each took one, and we went and came back and reported to each other, and that's how we began to learn about some of the issues that we would need to deal with at the age of 18 for our children. That being said, we really had the advantage of lots of caring, trained, professional educators whose hearts were all in the right place, who I never once felt like they weren't loving and caring for Daniel's academic needs and social needs. And suddenly, they were a bit out of their league, and which is why I'm so glad that we have all of this training. And how many of you are teachers in the? Oh, yay! Okay, that's wonderful. and I applaud you for, getting up so early and giving up a summer day here to be here. I should note, too, that I was a teacher. I was the regular ed half of inclusion at elementary, middle, and high school level. And I was always, I started out on the other side of that IEP table. And then when you switch, it is an eye-opener to be on the other side of that table with all the experts, nodding and taking notes, and your head is spinning. But the transfer of rights, now remember Daniel's 30, and so, 31, sorry. Correct me. And, we're talking, over a decade ago, and it just does my heart so good to see how far we've come, and now to talk about restoring rights to young people. I work with a lot of adults in Special Olympics, and some of them are going through that, the process to restore their rights. And so I don't even, that's a long answer to your question.
But it was a good answer. Do y'all relate to what she's saying? Yeah.
But, we didn't. And just the number one thing is fear for parents of not being able to protect their children. And then being guided, and Amanda will do a wonderful job, and we're going to role play in a little while an IEP, a transition IEP meeting, and guiding parents into where to go and at least what to begin thinking about. So that we really didn't have a transition of rights meeting.
And I think some of you are experienced educators. Does anybody want to offer a perspective about whether whether you had the information that you needed to inform parents in the process about legal rights transfer? So yes.
Right now, it's a part of the IEP. When they are 17 or will turn 17 during the duration of the IEP, it's a part of the process. So we have to inform parents and talk about it. However, just listening to the parent, it needs to be a little bit more in depth. But we do notify parents a year before the child turns 18, but it sounds like that discussion needs to be ongoing, because some parents really still don't understand because there's so much going on in an IEP meeting. But
Right.
it is a part, the child signs, and if the parent is present, they sign that IEP and they get a copy of the transfer of rights. And it does give like a brief explanation of what that means.
Okay.
We initiate it, like she said, when they're turning 17, but also after they've turned 18 as well. There's also an additional form that's reviewed at the IEP meeting and signed by the parent and or student. But at our school, we take it a step further. We have parent meetings every quarter. And so one of those parent meetings is a transition planning meeting where we invite lawyers, advocates to come in and talk about guardianship, the differences between guardianship versus power of attorney. So we like to keep our families informed ahead of time. And those parent meetings aren't just for our high school students, they're for our middle school and high school students, because we want them to start thinking about it before 17. So I think we are kind of ahead of the game in that aspect, and that we're providing that as a resource for our parents. And this is going to be excellent because now we can go back and provide even more in-depth information for our parents.
And you're going to get even more resources before the end of the day.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
And I'm a public 30-year retiree of the public school system, and I've switched out to a private school. And my concern is that they're still fighting the private versus public school battleground with our private school kids, and they're not getting the information that they need, and they still have the rights, a lot of the rights under the law. So, what I'm hearing is, and I fought that battle this year, so much so that the transition specialist wouldn't come back to my school, because every time I would say to her, because she would misrepresent the law. And I knew, because I had been in the school system for so many years, and I'd say, I don't know about that. I don't think that's quite right, or those kinds of things. I just felt uncomfortable. And I've been studying, and that's why I'm here today, studying and reading up so that I'm a little bit more cognizant of, what really are our students' rights for private school students. And so, I think that that's something that I just wanted to verbalize so that you all are aware that those students out there are.
I appreciate that comment, because I don't think in any of our team discussions we ever even considered private school students. So I see the team back there shaking their heads. It's something that we will consider as we're trying to distribute the information that we're presenting. I appreciate that comment. Jackie, can you wait for the mic? I know Jackie could, because we sat together yesterday.
I would say to the young lady in the back that you're way ahead of the game.
Yes.
Because when we talk about transition at my school, we're only talking about the transfer of rights, signing the IEP, and that's as far as it goes. It doesn't talk about guardianship. It doesn't talk about what happens after high school. It's just, okay, he's 18 now, he can sign his own IEP. You don't have to be here, and that's as far as it goes. They know nothing about guardianship, any other alternatives, nothing.
And that's when the fear, when you tell, yes, I am informed that there is a transfer of legal rights, and yes, I got that piece of paper. And then I go sit in the car after that meeting, and I think, what now? What do I do now? So I want a do-over. I'm going to, let's go back to school.
And we learned yesterday that he can if he wants to. There are opportunities for that. So thank you all for that perspective. I think I had a couple of other questions for you, but we actually touched on them. We already touched on them. I wanted you to talk about how you share that information with family members, and I wanted you to talk about what you consider putting in place for Daniel. So thank you. That was great.